I finished going in and putting all of my UV seams across the model. I've unwrapped everything and I'm ready to start packing them together. And there's some strategies that we need to remember and consider at the pack stage to ensure that we're getting the best results over in Substance Painter. I've brought the flower box back in action here again, and I want to draw focus to this. As a reminder, we have to start pretending and projecting what the final image is going to be that's going to go on this polygon. If there's anything that we can do now to help us create very accurate textures over in Substance Painter or wherever we're painting this, we should do that. I want to have a wood grain pattern show up on the front of my little flower box here. If you look at the orientation of the UVs at the moment, and this is what they look like, how in the world am I going to get a two-dimensional image of a wood grain texture when the UV is like this? All of our UVs are kind of like coloring books. We're going to be projecting an image onto that coloring page, that coloring book page. At the moment, we'd have to rotate the image at a very odd angle to get it, the wood grain pattern to flow kind of horizontally across the UVs, because this UV is going to determine how the image is going to go on these polygons over here on the model itself. The orientation of all of our UVs can and should be adjusted based on what's going to go on there. Pro tip, when it comes to working with defined patterns, like if you know that you're going to be putting like a wood grain on an image or on a model, or if you have like a metal texture that's got a very defined grid pattern in there, we want to be mindful of that. A brick pattern is another great example of this. We want to make sure that all of our UVs are oriented to the same orientation inside of our UV grid so that we're getting a consistent reproduction of the image pattern on the polygons. I know that over in the Substance Painter, all of my wood textures have the grain flowing horizontally. So I want to put one wood texture on all the flower box and have the wood grain automatically match. I don't want to have to customize it on a billion different pieces. So like this example down over here is a great challenge and illustration of this big picture idea. I want on this piece that I have selected, the wood grain should be flowing vertically. Okay, if this piece here, the front of our flower box is also oriented in the same direction, the wood grain is going to be flowing appropriately across all of these different UVs. When it comes to packing all of these islands in the UV grid, we're no longer thinking about a global orientation of those UVs in relationship to the model. We're thinking about an orientation of the UV in relation to an image that's going to go on the UVs, which eventually is going to go on the model itself. So I'm thinking about how a two-dimensional image is going to be mapped onto these UVs, which is then going to get projected onto the three-dimensional shape. All of the UVs that have a wood grain, I want them to be similar in orientation. That way I can put one image on the mesh and have it flow and project correctly across all the different modeling pieces. This idea is amplified into this part of our mesh as well. I want to have all of these pieces. These are all the pieces that create the rails and the stiles, excuse me, the buttons and the rails for all the window pieces. And here's a couple other ones. Let's grab them. Notice that when this happens, when you're unwrapping things, they kind of go all over the place sometimes. Okay. I want you to look very carefully at how I'm going to orient these. I have one piece here. This is going to be a wooden, window frame piece, but its UV is oriented in the same direction as the horizontal pieces. This piece here, or excuse me, this one and this one, the UVs are in the exact same orientation. That way, one wood grain texture can be applied to this part of my texture set, and visually in the scene itself, that grain is going to be mapped accordingly to the model's orientation. It just makes it very, very simple. And over in Substance Painter, it's an easy thing that we can do now to ensure that everything is working correctly. Now I need to make sure that all the UVs for a texture set have been packed together, because I want the computer to very quickly place these textures or these UVs on the UV grid as a unit, as a group. So I'm just going to select all of those parts and pieces, hide everything else. Oh, I forgot the rafters. Let me hit undo. So if you remember correctly, on my particular model, I have 4 different texture sets. So 4 different UV maps that I need to manage. None of the UVs in each of these UV maps can be overlapping. It's going to stop us from being able to customize and create individualized textures for all these different parts and pieces. So it's important that we unwrap them together. Notice I've selected all the objects that are going to be the member of the exact same material, house details. With them selected, I can hit the tab key, and it's going to bring open all of the UVs for all the different parts and pieces, and I got a bunch of them. I'm going to hit the A key to grab all of them, and I'm going to pack them. There's one small change that I want you to that I recommend that you look at when you're packing these. Let's go ahead and start this pack process. Excuse me, it's under the UV pull-down menu in the UV grid, and of course, we're going to do pack islands. Now, when you do pack islands, there's a couple things. Excuse me. A couple things that I want you to be super mindful of. First and foremost, we can scale them. That's just fine. However, we want to make sure that we're not rotating them. If this is enabled, the computer's going to try to rotate all of our UVs in any sort of odd direction to get us the kind of the most efficient pack. Well, I've customized a lot of my UVs, like the doors, the windows, to be local orientation so that my wood grain pattern can be reproduced quickly. So I'm going to turn this off and then hit OK. It's going to take a second. Let it kind of cruise for a minute. Don't interrupt it. The computer's doing some heavy lifting for us, and it's gone through and it's packed all of our UVs into this wonderful, wonderful grid. Now, a grand majority of these are the window rafters, and you can see that here's probably saw all the flower box pieces for the most part are all down here in the corner, but this is mission accomplished. I'm going to go through and do the exact same thing for the 3 other materials that I have in my scene, packing them all into one UV grid. None of the UVs can be overlapping each other. We are now creating a coloring book that's going to be sent over into Substance Painter, and it's important that each island be it's kind of separate and individualized so that we can paint and color on each island correctly. So spend some time, look at the orientation of all of your UVs, and then pack them together as a group for each texture set at the conclusion of that stage.